People often say, old age is peaceful, but no one tells you how cruel old age becomes when the people you trusted the most turn into strangers. My name doesn't matter anymore. People now call me Grandma. But once, I was a wife, a mother, a woman who gave everything she had to her family. This is not a movie. This is not fiction. This is my life. And if you are listening to my story today, remember one thing: blood relations don't always mean loyalty. I was born in a small town where doors stayed open and hearts stayed honest. I married young. My husband was a hardworking man, not very rich, but rich in values. Together, we built a home, brick by brick. Sacrifice by sacrifice, we had 3 children, 2 sons, and 1 daughter. I didn't raise them with money. I raised them with morals. I cooked for them, prayed for them, fought the world for them. I believed one thing with all my heart: if you give your children love, they will return it when you grow old. I was wrong. My husband worked day and night. I supported him silently. When others slept, we dreamed. When others rested, we struggled. Years passed. Our small house turned into a big one. Land, savings, respect. People in the town said, "Your children are lucky to have parents like you." I smiled with pride. I didn't know that pride was preparing my fall. Then one night, life punished me. My husband fell sick. Hospitals, medicines, sleepless nights. I sold my jewelry, my bangles, even my wedding ring. I didn't complain. Because when you love someone, you don't count losses. One morning, he held my hand and never opened his eyes again. That day, half of me died with him. After the funeral, the house felt empty. My children were adults now. Married, educated, they said, "Don't worry, Ma, we are here." I believed them. I transferred everything in their names: the house, the land, the savings. People warned me, "Don't do this, keep something for yourself." I smiled and said, "My children are my security." That sentence still burns my soul. At first, it was small things. My food became leftover food. My room became smaller. My voice became ignored. Family dinners happened without calling me. Decisions were made without asking me. I became a guest in the house I built. One day, my eldest son looked at me and said, "Ma, old people should stay quiet. You don't understand today's world." That day, something cracked inside me. My daughter stopped visiting. My sons argued over money in front of me as if I was invisible. If I spoke, I was creating drama. If I cried, I was emotionally blackmailing. I started talking to the walls. At night, I hugged my husband's photo and whispered, "Was trusting them my biggest mistake?" One evening, I was called into the living room. All 3 children sat there, serious faces, cold eyes. My youngest son said, "Ma, this house is too crowded. You should live somewhere else." I laughed. I thought it was a joke, but no one laughed back. My daughter avoided eye contact. Then my eldest son said the words that changed my destiny. "This house is legally ours now." I felt dizzy. I asked softly, "Where will I go?" And he replied, "That's not our problem." That night, I walked out of my own house with one small bag. No money, no jewelry, no home, only memories. Rain was falling, and so were my tears. People passed by. No one noticed, because the world doesn't stop for broken grandmothers. I slept that night on a railway station bench. I was 62 years old, homeless, betrayed, but what my children didn't know was they had taken my house, but they had not taken my courage, and from that night onward, my real journey began. That railway station bench was cold, but not colder than the hearts of my children. Trains came and went. People rushed past me, carrying destinations, dreams, families, and I sat there, a grandmother with nowhere to go. I kept asking myself one question: how did love turn into abandonment? I didn't sleep that night. I just watched the sky slowly change color and wondered if morning would bring mercy. It didn't. By the second day, hunger began to hurt. Not just the stomach, the soul. I stood outside a small tea stall. The smell of bread made my hands shake. The owner noticed me staring. He asked kindly, "Mother, are you okay?" I couldn't speak. He handed me a piece of bread and a cup of tea. That bread tasted like dignity and shame mixed together. I had fed an entire family for decades. Now, I was surviving on charity. I cried silently. That evening, a woman approached me. She was my age. Her eyes carried stories like mine. She said, "There is a shelter nearby. Old women stay there." I followed her. The shelter was small, crowded, but safe. That night, I slept on a thin mattress on the floor. For the first time in my life, I had no responsibility for anyone else, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely alone. The shelter had a small broken mirror. When I looked at myself, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Wrinkled face, tired eyes, white hair tied carelessly, but behind those eyes, there was still fire. I whispered to myself, "You are not done yet." The shelter caretaker asked, "Can anyone help with cleaning or cooking?" My hand went up automatically. Work had always been my language. I cleaned floors, washed dishes, helped other women eat. In return, I received food and a little respect. That respect felt better than money. Weeks passed. I listened to other women's stories. Some were abandoned by sons, some by husbands, some by society. I realized something painful. My story wasn't rare. It was common, but instead of breaking me, that truth strengthened me. If so many women survived this, why couldn't I? One day, a volunteer visited the shelter. She was young, educated. She asked us to share our stories so she could write about them. When it was my turn, words poured out like a river. Everyone listened. Some cried, some held my hand. The volunteer looked at me and said, "You tell stories beautifully. Have you ever written?" I shook my head. She smiled and said, "You should." That night, I borrowed a pen. And for the first time, I wrote my pain. I wrote about my husband, my children, my betrayal. I didn't write for revenge. I wrote for release. Writing gave me power. Every word healed a wound. The volunteer shared my story online without names. People reacted, they commented, they shared, they said, "This sounds like my mother. This is happening everywhere. This woman is brave." For the first time since my betrayal, the world saw me. One afternoon, the volunteer returned with excitement. She said, "A local newspaper wants to publish your story. They want to pay." I laughed. Who would pay an old woman for her pain? But they did. That first payment wasn't big, but it was earned. I bought myself a shawl. Warm, simple. I felt human again. More stories followed. More writing. More recognition. People invited me to speak at small gatherings, community halls, women's groups. They didn't invite me as a victim. They invited me as a voice, and slowly, money started coming in. Not charity, respectful income. I saved every coin, not for luxury, for independence. People started calling me the grandma who survived. Young women hugged me. Older women found hope in me. I smiled often now, not because life was perfect, but because I had reclaimed myself. Years passed. I moved out of the shelter into a small rented room. I cooked my own food again. I slept peacefully. I didn't check on my children. I didn't need to. Silence was my answer to betrayal. One day, news reached me. My eldest son's business failed. My youngest son was drowning in debt. My house was under legal trouble. I felt no happiness, no sadness, just clarity. Life doesn't forget. It waits. That night, I sat by my window holding a cup of tea. I whispered softly, "You took my home, but life is taking your peace." And deep inside, I knew the reunion was coming. And this time, I would not beg. Fate has a strange sense of timing. Just when I had learned how to live without my children, they remembered I existed. One afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I opened it slowly, and there he stood, my eldest son, older, thinner, eyes tired. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "Ma." That one word carried years of silence, guilt, and need. He sat on the same chair where visitors once sat to hear my story. He avoided my eyes. Finally, he said, "Ma, we made mistakes." I waited. He continued, "We need help." I looked at his trembling hands, the same hands that once pushed me out of my own house. I asked calmly, "What kind of help?" He swallowed. "Financial." I didn't answer immediately. Silence has power when used correctly. I poured tea, offered him a cup, the same tea I once drank alone on a railway station bench. He spoke nervously. "My business partner cheated me. Loans piled up. The house is almost gone." I nodded slowly. Then I said, "Sit, listen." I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I simply told him my story, the hunger, the shelter, the nights on cold floors. His eyes filled with tears. I said, "When you threw me out, I didn't curse you. I trusted life." He whispered, "Ma, forgive me." I leaned forward and said, "Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, and help does not mean surrender." I stood up, went to my cupboard, brought out documents, savings, investments, royalties from my writing. His eyes widened. He had no idea who I had become. I said, "I will help you, but not as your dependent." He looked confused. I continued, "The house will be legally transferred back to my name. You will sign it." He hesitated. I looked him straight in the eyes. "The choice is yours. This is not revenge. This is balance." He nodded and signed. Weeks later, I walked back into that house, not as a helpless old woman, but as the owner. The walls remembered me. The floor knew my footsteps. My daughter stood in the corner, crying. My youngest son couldn't look at me. I didn't hug them. I didn't scold them. I simply said, "I am back, but things will be different." I made simple rules. Respect was mandatory. No shouting, no control over my life. I would contribute but never be dependent. They agreed. They had no choice, but more than that, they had guilt. Living together again was not easy. Trust doesn't grow overnight, but something had changed. They listened now. They asked before deciding. They saw me not as a burden, but as a woman who survived. Meanwhile, my writing reached national platforms. TV interviews, podcasts, public talks. People called me a symbol of resilience. My children watched me on screens. They saw strangers respect me more than they ever had. That realization hurt them, but it also educated them. One evening, my granddaughter asked, "Grandma, why do people clap for you?" I smiled and said, "Because I stood up when life pushed me down." She hugged me. That hug healed something no apology ever could. Then came the hardest moment. My youngest son came to me one night and said, "Ma, we were afraid you would take revenge." I replied softly, "I did, by becoming stronger." Tears rolled down his face. "I'm ashamed," he said. I placed my hand on his head. Shame is the beginning of wisdom. I could have punished them, thrown them out, but bitterness is heavy. I chose peace, not for them, for me. That night, as I lay in my old room, I realized something powerful. The woman they once abandoned had returned, not to destroy the family, but to redefine it, and the final lesson was still waiting to be spoken. The morning sunlight entered my room gently, as if it knew this chapter was special. I sat on my bed and looked around the room that once witnessed my tears. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken anymore. I was complete. That evening, I asked my children to sit with me, not as a mother begging for love, but as a woman who had earned her voice. They sat quietly, waiting. I said calmly, "I am not here to remind you of your sins. Life already did that." They lowered their heads. I continued, "When your father and I built this family, we didn't build property. We built values. Somewhere along the way, you forgot those values. Tears fell, but I didn't stop. You measured success with money and measured my worth with my age." Silence filled the room. Then I said the words that changed everything. Old age is not weakness. It is experience, and experience deserves respect. I looked at each of them. Never wait for life to teach you lessons that parents try to teach you with love. I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. But forgiveness came with boundaries. I would live independently. I would manage my finances. I would speak freely. They agreed, and this time they meant it. That night, I stood before my husband's photo. I said softly, "You were right, life tested me, but I didn't fail." I felt his presence, or maybe it was just my strength finally acknowledging itself. My story traveled far beyond our home. Women wrote to me from different countries. They said, "You gave me courage, you gave me hope, you saved my life." I realized pain shared honestly becomes purpose. If you are listening to me as a son or daughter, remember this. Your parents are not burdens. They are the reason you stand where you stand today. And if you abandon them, life will remind you in ways you won't like. And if you are a parent, love your children deeply, but never give away your dignity. Teach them independence. Practice it yourself. I was betrayed. I was abandoned. I was broken, but I rebuilt myself. Not with hatred, but with courage. Not with revenge, but with self-respect. If an old grandmother can rise from a railway station bench to stand strong again, so can you. Never let anyone decide your worth. Not even family. This was not just my story. It is the story of countless parents whose silence hides their pain. Listen to them. Respect them. Before life teaches you what love should have taught first.